What if I told you that one of Hollywood's most celebrated actors has been living a carefully constructed lie for decades, and the truth behind Joaquin Phoenix's tortured performances isn't acting at all, but a window into a darkness so profound that it nearly destroyed him multiple times? The man you see on screen, contort his face into expressions of pain and madness, isn't just playing characters. He's channeling real demons that have haunted him since childhood, demons born from trauma so severe that most people would have broken completely under the weight. Joaquin Phoenix didn't choose his darkness. It chose him. And what emerged from that abyss is both a masterpiece of human resilience and a terrifying glimpse into what happens when talent and torment collide in the most devastating ways possible. Born into a family that existed on the fringes of society, Joaquin's early life reads like a nightmare disguised as an adventure story, with parents who dragged their children across continents in pursuit of idealistic dreams that quickly turned into survival nightmares, leaving scars that would shape every role he would ever play and every relationship he would ever form. The Phoenix family's journey through South America wasn't the bohemian adventure it appeared to be on the surface. It was a desperate flight from reality that exposed young Joaquin to poverty, uncertainty, and experiences that no child should ever witness, creating the foundation for the emotional volatility that would later make him famous and nearly kill him in the process. When his older brother River became a teen heartthrob, Joaquin watched from the shadows as fame consumed someone he idolized, learning early that success in Hollywood wasn't salvation, but often a different kind of prison, one that would eventually claim River's life in the most public and traumatic way imaginable, right outside the Viper Room on Halloween night in 1993. While Joaquin made the frantic 911 call that the entire world would eventually hear, his voice breaking as he begged for help, that would never come in time. That night didn't just kill River Phoenix. It shattered Joaquin's faith in the idea that talent and goodness could protect you from the darkness that lurks beneath Hollywood's glittering surface. And from that moment forward, every role he chose seemed designed to punish himself for surviving when his brother couldn't, leading to a pattern of self-destruction disguised as artistic dedication that would define the next 3 decades of his life. The intensity that audiences mistake for method acting is actually Joaquin's way of channeling real psychological fractures, using his roles as socially acceptable ways to explore the mental territories that most people spend their entire lives trying to avoid, which explains why performances feel so uncomfortably authentic, and why critics consistently describe his work as having an edge that other actors simply cannot replicate. His transformation for different roles isn't just physical. It's psychological warfare that he wages against himself, deliberately triggering his own trauma responses to access emotional states that would hospitalize most people, a process so dangerous that directors often worry they're witnessing actual mental breakdowns rather than performances. Yet Joaquin continues because the pain of not performing, of sitting alone with his thoughts, is somehow worse than the controlled destruction he inflicts on himself in front of cameras. The infamous incident during the filming of I'm Still Here, where he appeared to have a complete psychological breakdown, wasn't the elaborate hoax that some claimed. It was Joaquin's most honest moment, a glimpse behind the mask he wears to function in public, revealing someone so damaged by years of trauma and guilt that the line between reality and performance had completely dissolved, leaving him unable to distinguish between Joaquin Phoenix the person and the characters he creates to cope with existence. His relationships follow the same pattern of intensity and self-sabotage, with partners describing him as someone capable of profound connection who simultaneously seems determined to destroy anything good that enters his life, as if happiness itself is a betrayal of his brother's memory and the suffering that shaped him into the artist he became, creating a cycle where success breeds guilt, guilt breeds self-destruction, and self-destruction paradoxically fuels even greater artistic achievements. The vegan activism that many see as evidence of his compassion is actually rooted in something much darker, an inability to cause additional suffering in a world that already contains too much pain, combined with a form of self-punishment where he denies himself even the simple pleasure of eating what he wants, turning every meal into a reminder of his commitment to absorbing rather than contributing to the world's pain, which explains why his advocacy work often seems less like optimism and more like penance. His refusal to engage with social media or maintain a conventional public presence isn't modesty or artistic integrity. It's self-preservation by someone who knows that too much external input would shatter the delicate psychological balance he's constructed to keep functioning, because the real Joaquin Phoenix is far more fragile than the intense characters he portrays, existing in a constant state of emotional emergency that requires careful management to prevent complete collapse. The stuttering speech pattern that emerges during interviews isn't nervousness. It's his mind literally struggling to translate internal chaos into coherent communication. The same struggle that makes his acting so powerful, because he's constantly fighting to maintain control over psychological forces that most people never experience, let alone learn to channel productively. His choice of roles reveals someone who finds safety only in exploring the darkest corners of human experience, because those territories feel like home to him in ways that traditional happiness never could, which is why his performances in films like Joker and You Were Never Really Here feel less like acting and more like documentary footage of someone wrestling with demons that the audience can't fully comprehend. The physical transformations he undergoes for different characters aren't just professional dedication. They're forms of self-harm disguised as craft, ways of literally changing his body to match the psychological damage he's inflicting on himself, because the alternative, existing in his natural state without the armor role, is too painful to sustain for extended periods. When he won the Oscar for Joker, his acceptance speech revealed someone who had spent so long inhabiting damaged characters that he could barely access the part of himself capable of receiving praise, stumbling through words that should have been triumphant, because triumph itself feels foreign to someone who has built an identity around surviving tragedy and channeling suffering into art. The irony of Joaquin Phoenix's career is that his greatest gift, the ability to access and portray psychological extremes with devastating authenticity, is also the thing that may eventually destroy him, because each performance requires him to venture further into emotional territories that most therapists would warn their patients to avoid. Yet he continues, because those dark places are the only spaces where he feels truly alive and connected to the brother whose death continues to define his existence. His upcoming project suggests someone who has no intention of seeking lighter material or healing from his trauma, but instead plans to continue using his art as a form of controlled self-destruction, pushing deeper into characters who mirror his own psychological fractures, while audiences cheer for performances that are actually desperate attempts to make sense of senseless loss and overwhelming guilt. The man who can transform into anyone on screen remains trapped by his inability to transform into someone who can forgive himself for surviving when River didn't. Someone who can accept happiness without feeling like he's betraying the memory of the person who meant more to him than his own life, which means that every brilliant performance comes at the cost of his own psychological well-being, creating a career built on the slow-motion destruction of one of Hollywood's most gifted artists. What makes Joaquin Phoenix's dark reality even more tragic is that his talent ensures he will continue to be celebrated and rewarded for the very behavior that's slowly killing him, creating a feedback loop where artistic success depends on psychological suffering, and psychological suffering generates the raw material for artistic success, trapping him in a cycle that may ultimately consume him the same way it consumed his brother, just more slowly and with more applause. This is the price of genius when it emerges from trauma. It creates art so powerful that it justifies the destruction of the artist, and Joaquin Phoenix has paid that price with every role, every transformation, and every moment when he steps in front of camera to show the world what it looks like when someone refuses to let tragedy break them, even as it slowly grinds them down into something unrecognizable, leaving audiences to wonder whether they're witnessing the greatest actor of his generation or simply watching someone destroy himself in slow motion while the world calls it entertainment.